Developing right now on Morning News Now, millions of people digging out after a strong winter storm that slammed much of the Northeast. And it's not over yet. This morning, more weather alerts in effect as a second system approaches. We are tracking it all. Also this morning, history in the House chamber. Republicans voting to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas after a failed attempt last week over allegations he unlawfully allowed millions of migrants to cross the southern border.
What he's done is violated the statutes. He hadn't enforced what the laws of the land.
And in New York, the results are in for a special election to replace disgraced former Congressman George Santos. We have the latest. Plus, worries on Wall Street after a higher-than-expected inflation report. We'll break down the numbers and how it could all impact your bottom line. And on this Valentine's Day, a reminder to stop and smell the roses. What researchers are telling us about a link between smell and your mental health. And a very happy Valentine's Day to you at home.
Lavender everywhere. That always cheers me up. Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to get started with the cleanup after yesterday's winter storm that slammed the Northeast. Nearly 50 million Americans were under winter alerts as the swift-moving snowstorm blanketed the region.
Parts of Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and New Jersey clocked in with well over a foot of snow. During the morning commute, it was falling up to 2 inches an hour. Well, the storm has now moved out. There is concern this morning that the overnight freeze could cause problems on the roads as melting snow and standing water turn to ice. Pennsylvania was hit especially hard. More than 130,000 people lost power, and troopers responded to 1,200-plus roadway incidents. Air travelers didn't fare much better. The snowy conditions caused more than 1,500 flights to be canceled. And in New York City, more than 3 inches of snow fell in Central Park. That may sound rather minuscule, but it's actually the most the city has seen since 2022. Meteorologist Angie Lassman joins us now with more on all this.
Hey, Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. I got to start things off with a much quieter forecast for the Northeast and a festive one at that. We've got lovely conditions in lovely Pennsylvania. Of course, for Valentine's Day in Romance, Missouri, we're looking at temperatures into the low 60s. These numbers well above normal for this time of year. We've got Valentine, Nebraska coming in at a chilly 37 degrees with dealing with mostly cloudy conditions through the day today. And Darling, Arizona expected to hit 50 degrees with full sunshine later today. Out west, we've got our next storm system that's going to impact folks from Roseville, California to Sweet, Idaho. But it won't hamper your plans too much as we go through the rest of our work week. But let's talk about what we've got now. 8 million people under these winter alerts. This has nothing to do with that system that we saw yesterday. That one is long gone. Now we're watching this next Clipper system that will exit the Rockies and be a quick moving storm system that brings some light accumulations, mostly to folks across the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and eventually the Northeast in the next 48 hours. Here's the deal by later today. You can see the northern plains picking up some of that snow. We'll have those advisories in effect from basically the Dakotas to Michigan through the day today before that system quickly works out to the east. A little bit of snow, a little bit of rain impacting folks across the Northeast here as we get into the day tomorrow. It's not going to be crazy amounts of snow by any means, and that system will be long gone by the time we get to the end of our work week. But of course, next in line of the storm systems, this one that we'll watch work into portions of the Tennessee Valley, impacting folks with a little bit of rain. Memphis to Cincinnati could see the potential for a wintry mix and maybe even some snow across this region before it continues working east. And I know this is what everyone wants to see, those snow totals. Not all that impressive for the most part. We could see a couple spots in northern Michigan, maybe parts of the Dakotas picking up 4 inches, 6 inches. But for the most part, it looks like 1 inch to 2 inches across that region. Similar story across the Northeast. We'll pick up maybe 1/4 of an inch to 1 inch for most folks. Meanwhile, right now, temperatures in places like Kansas City, who, by the way, have a Super Bowl parade later today, those are going to be quite warm. 64 degrees for folks that'll be out there celebrating that win later this afternoon. We've got 65 in Little Rock. Columbus heads to the low 40s. Even that is above normal for this time of year. So it feels like spring across this region. We've got mid-60s on tap tomorrow for Raleigh, upper 60s 60s for Tupelo and into the 70s and well into the 70s for Houston with a high of 76 degrees. So not feeling much like winter there. We will see temperatures dip slightly here as we get into the weekend. Places like Pittsburgh will drop down into those low 30s by Saturday. New York City ends up into the upper 30s by Saturday too, guys.
Trying to contrast today's temperature in Kansas City with that incredibly cold game there just a few weeks ago.
Isn't that, wow, that's a really good perspective.
Yeah, in a very short period of time.
A very short period of time.
Good to have the warm weather today.
Yeah, good timing for that. I like your hearts, Angie.
I like yours.
Thank you. Now let's head to Capitol Hill, where House Republicans have voted to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over his handling of the border. The historic vote makes Mayorkas the first cabinet secretary to be impeached in more than 100 years. The House held the vote last night, exactly 1 week after their first attempt collapsed on the floor. For his part, Mayorkas called the allegations baseless.
On the other side of the Capitol, the Senate passed a long-delayed national security package that includes foreign aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, but the bill faces an uphill battle in the House. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer praised the aid package and called on House Speaker Mike Johnson to put politics aside to get the bill passed.
I will say to Speaker Johnson, I am confident that there's a large majority in the House who will vote for this bill. I am confident there are many Republicans in his caucus, I know I've spoken to a whole bunch of them, who feel strongly we ought to pass this bill. I call on Speaker Johnson to rise to the occasion, to do the right thing, bring this bill to the floor.
For more this morning, we're joined by NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin. Julie, good morning. So let's start with the Mayorkas impeachment. It now goes to the Senate for trial. When can we expect that to happen? And given that Democrats control the Senate, I mean, is there any chance here he's convicted?
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. What a split screen moment yesterday, right? When you had the Senate passing that foreign aid bill, and then on the other side, you had the House Republicans impeaching Mayorkas. It's a really good question you bring up of what happens next. Obviously, Democrats control the Senate, so certainly we can see a preview of how this trial is going to play out there. They've called this nothing more than partisan politics by the Republicans. They've said that the border needs to be addressed with legislation. Obviously, Republicans blocked that effort. But basically, about in a week and a half, when the Senate is back from their recess, their state work period, the impeachment articles will be transmitted from the House to the Senate, and then Senate pro tempore Patty Murray, one of the top senators on the Democratic side of the aisle, will preside over a trial, and senators will be sworn in as jurors almost immediately.
So, Julie, let's talk about the foreign aid package. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he knows there are Republicans in the House who would vote for the bill, but Speaker Mike Johnson has vowed he's not going to put the Senate bill on the House floor without a border policy change in it. Can the Speaker really ignore a bill that does have Republican support like this? And is there a way for Democrats to get around the Speaker?
It's such a good question, Joe. With 22 Republicans in the Senate supporting, signing on to this bill, rather, with nearly all Democrats, certainly that is a strong sign, a signal, certainly that would put pressure on Speaker Johnson to put this package on the floor. But you're right. He said he's not going to do it without those border security provisions attached to it. We all know that Senate bipartisan border security bill that would have changed asylum laws, that would have made it harder for illegal migrants to cross the border. That was blocked by Republicans in the Senate, in large part because Speaker Johnson had said publicly this bill is dead on arrival. So now, of course, Johnson faces several options. Some of them include something called as a procedural tactic known as the discharge petition. It's all these wonky things the Democrats and the minority could potentially do to force Johnson's hand here. The question is, though, of course, Johnson has a lot of political calculations to make if he wants to stay in the job. He already was threatened by a motion to vacate, essentially oust him from that top job by one of his own. And certainly this is something he's watching closely because former Speaker Kevin McCarthy was ousted in the same vein.
Julie, House Speaker Mike Johnson wants this in-person, one-on-one meeting with President Joe Biden before any action's taken on this supplemental aid package. What are you hearing from House Republicans? Where do we go from here? And is that meeting going to happen?
And this was really interesting last night. Steve Scalise, who's actually the GOP leader, he was out for cancer treatment for the last couple of weeks. I caught up with him last night, and he brought this up to me. I was later able to confirm this by a source close to Johnson that, yes, he's been asking the president for a one-on-one meeting for the last 2 months. You'll remember they had that big meeting with a bunch of key congressional leaders in January. Johnson says that's not enough. Here's what Scalise had to tell me last night.
bottom line, without HR 2, does Ukraine get aid or not?
Well, the president needs to sit down with the speaker and start talking about that. Why he refuses to talk is beyond me. But I think at some point the president's going to recognize if he wants to talk about Ukraine, he's got to also talk about securing America's border. And the speaker stands ready. But the speaker's been calling on the president for months now to have this meeting. The president's got to do his job.
Look, for the White House's part, they want Johnson to admit that he has to at least form some kind of compromise here when it comes to sending aid overseas. Obviously, the partisan Republican H.R. 2 bill to secure the border will not stand a chance in the Senate. The president said a long time ago that is dead on arrival on his desk. And so we'll see if Johnson actually wants to compromise here. But I just really don't think border security is going to get done in an election year, guys.
Julie Sirkin, thank you so much. Well, while Washington fights over foreign aid funding, Ukraine says the delay is having a major impact on the battlefield in their ongoing fight with Russia. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has the latest from Ukraine.
I returned to the city of Kherson, near the front line in southern Ukraine. It was largely empty. Russian troops just a few hundred yards away now attack with artillery and drones about 30 times every day. It wasn't always this dire. 2 years ago, when Russian troops invaded Ukraine, they quickly occupied Kherson until Ukrainian troops found their feet and liberated the city. It turned out to be Ukraine's last major victory. The counteroffensive fizzled. Russia still holds about 20% of Ukraine's territory and now has the advantage of momentum. Vlad Nedostop works with Ukraine's civilian defense here.
They're firing a lot.
All the time.
If you don't get more ammunition, are you going to lose this war?
Yes.
Down here in the basement, they've organized a small show for the kids underground.
Under a theater, volunteers dressed like angels play Pass the Hat. If the music stops and you have the hat, you have to get on stage and do a crazy dance. Ava Dubovia is 11 years old.
What's it like to live like that? To live here with that weight, that burden?
Every day could be your last because bombs are falling close by and you have to run to a shelter. This is our life, our reality, and it's a nightmare, she says. And this is the only safe place in the city where children can play.
President Zelensky called on Congress to approve more aid, saying the world is waiting for American leadership.
Our thanks to Richard Engel for that report. As we've been discussing, the new aid package passed in the Senate. It would provide about $60 billion to Ukraine, the largest since the war began 2 years ago.
Israeli Defense Forces have released new video allegedly showing a top Hamas leader using the tunnel system in Gaza days after the October 7th attacks. His name is Yahya Sinwar. Now, NBC News has not been able to independently verify that the person seen in the video is Sinwar. The Hamas leader has been evading officials since the attack on Israel in October. Israeli leaders say Sinwar is one of several people directly responsible for planning and executing the October 7th attack. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv with more on this. Raf, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Those hostage negotiation talks are continuing in Cairo, and while Sinwar is not at the table, he looms large over these talks. There is an irony here that Israel is indirectly negotiating with this man and at the same time trying to track him down and kill him.
4 months into this war, Israel claims to have killed, captured, or wounded around half of Hamas's 30,000 fighters in Gaza.
We've shattered 18 out of 24 Hamas battalions, and we're mopping up the remaining terrorists with ongoing raids.
But Israel's #1 target remains at large. Yahya Sinwar is the leader of Hamas in Gaza. And according to Israeli officials, the man who masterminded the October 7th massacre. Sinwar has been in hiding since then, and despite a $400,000 bounty on his head and an air and ground assault on Gaza that's killed thousands of Palestinian civilians, he's so far stayed one step ahead of Israeli forces. We joined some of those troops as they pushed into Gaza, arriving in the remains of Han Yunis, Sinwar's home city.
Where we're standing here, my soldiers fought to take this ground.
We followed them deep underground into a set of tunnels where they believe Sinwar was recently sheltering. They offered no firm evidence, but said these beds suggest senior leaders were here. While inside this cage, troops say they discovered the DNA of 3 young hostages, all released during the temporary ceasefire deal in November.
Somewhere in this vast tunnel complex, the Israeli military believes Sinwar is hiding. It is not clear if he is still able to give commands to his troops, how much he can communicate with the outside world. But every day that he is alive is a day that he is defying Israel.
And so the hunt continues.
You've been chasing Sinwar for 4 months. Why is it you haven't caught him yet?
We'll get him. He doesn't care about his people. He's putting his people between him and us.
Sinwar was captured by Israel in the late 1980s, but he was released in 2011, one of more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners freed in exchange for a single soldier held by Hamas.
He's looking at you, and you say to yourself, he's going to kill me. He's going to jump at me.
Michael Kubi, a former Israeli intelligence officer, spent more than 100 hours interrogating Sinwar.
Sinwar is very charismatic. People used to say that he is psychopath. I say that he is not psychopath. He knew exactly what he wanted.
Sinwar learned to speak Hebrew in prison.
Not only to speak Hebrew, he read all the books about the Israeli leaders, about the history, about the geography, about everything that he can read the Israeli. He even translate, books from Hebrew to Arabic at the prison.
Having studied his enemy, Sinwar rose quickly through Hamas's leadership after his release and fooled Israel into believing he was more interested in governing Gaza than using it as a base for attacks, a misreading that became fatally clear on October 7th. Israel now hunting Sinwar, while at the same time negotiating with him over the fate of the hostages. And few believe his death will mean the defeat of Hamas.
Israel has assassinated so many of Hamas leaders in the past, didn't do anything to the organization, but make it stronger, more determined.
But for Israel, killing Sinwar would be a symbolic victory and some small measure of justice.
Now, I met Sinwar 5 years ago in Gaza. He's a very intense man. As you can imagine, his background is from Hamas's internal security force, where he is alleged to have murdered a number of suspected Palestinian collaborators. And Israeli officials say they believe he is keeping some of those hostages close to him for his own protection and that he won't allow himself to be taken alive. Jeff.
All right, Raf Sanchez, thanks for that report. Let's bring in former Israeli intelligence director Efrem Halavi for more on this. Thank you so much for joining us. So this video, does it change the way Israel approaches the hunt for Sinwar at all? And just overall, what's at stake here for Israeli forces?
I think every day we're getting closer to him. Every day the area in which he can move safely is becoming less and less possible to negotiate and to move across. And therefore, it's a question of time now. And it's a question of determination of Israeli defense forces to get at him and ultimately to kill him. Because that is the mission now, not to arrest him again, as was in the past, but to settle the account with him, which is the biggest account we've had with such a person.
How big a loss would the capture or the killing, as you're describing, of Sinwar signify for Hamas? I mean, is that sort of an indicator that makes it seem almost that victory over Hamas for Israeli leadership is possible?
I don't think that a single killing of a leader is the end of the story, but it certainly is a very major step in that direction. And since Sinwar, for many years, has been the commander on the ground, obviously, once he's no longer there, the future of the movement he has been serving is in grave doubt of survival.
We've seen Israeli forces have been targeting Han Yunis. That is actually where Sinwar was born. Do you expect the attacks on the region are going to continue as this search for Sinwar continues? What do you think we're going to see strategically from Israel's military?
There are two things we're going to see. First of all, we have the negotiation on the release of Israel's hostages, which are in the hands of the Hamas, and that is a major item on the agenda. And negotiations are being held in Cairo. There's not been a major change in the situation at the moment, but I think as days go by, the chances of this negotiation producing a positive result of an exchange is growing. Secondly, parallel to this, two things are happening. First of all, the move against Sinwar personally, and thirdly, which is no less significant, as I talked to you this morning, the situation in the north of the country has been exaggerated now more than it has been in the past. We had a very, very heated exchange this morning at the north of the country. We have suffered the death of one of our citizens, and there were direct attempts to hit at the center of the command positions of the Israeli forces in the north.
All right. Ephraim Halaby, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
Friday is going to be a big day for former President Trump. That's when a verdict is expected in his $370 million civil fraud case here in New York. A person with direct knowledge of the situation tells NBC News. The ruling will end a trial that began last October and included testimony from the former president, plus his three oldest kids. Trump is accused of inflating the value of his assets in order to get more favorable loan terms. The lawsuit was brought on by New York Attorney General Letitia James. Judge Arthur Engoron, who's presiding over the case, already found Trump and his executives engaged in fraud. He must now decide the issue of intent and what penalties Trump and his company should pay. Attorney General James is seeking $370 million in damages and a ban on Trump conducting business in the New York real estate industry.
Well, Democrat Tom Suozzi is heading back to Congress after coming out on top in the special election in New York's 3rd congressional district.
NBC News projects Suozzi has defeated Republican Mazi Pilip by more than 7 points in a closely watched race. That means Democrats have flipped the Long Island district, once held by former Congressman George Santos. He, of course, was expelled in December following his indictment on federal charges. Now, Republicans' thin majority in the House is even narrower with a 6-seat edge, 219 to 213. Suozzi thanked his supporters following his victory.
This race was fought amidst a closely divided electorate, much like our whole country. It's time to find common ground and start delivering for the people of the United States of America.
For more on this race, let's bring in NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark, always good to have you with us. So how was he able to pull off this win? What are some of the big takeaways in terms of how voters felt heading to the polls yesterday? What did we learn?
Yeah, Savannah, this is a big victory for Democrats and likely the most competitive special election we're going to see before Election Day 2024 in November. But Democrats did have some clear advantages in this contest. This is a congressional district that Joe Biden won by 8 percentage points in 2020. Democrats had the spending advantage. Suozzi's a former member of Congress who represented this district. But on the issues, one thing that we can actually end up learning is that Democrats really did lean into immigration. They weren't playing defense, they were playing offense. And Suozzi ended up criticizing Republicans for walking away from that Senate immigration deal that former President Donald Trump helped tank.
Be interesting to see if that's a test of what we'll see later on this year when it comes to the immigration issue. Of course, yesterday in the Northeast, big winter storm. Long Island was certainly part of that. How much of an impact did weather have on the turnout? And did early voting, mail-in voting, something we know former President Trump isn't a huge fan of, did that play a role here?
Yeah, Joe, everything ends up mattering in our elections, in our closely divided politics and weather and turnout. Absolutely. Overall turnout was about 170,000 participants. Pretty good for a special election, but do note that that is down from the 270,000 who participated in the 2022 midterms in this district when George Santos was able to win that race. And as you and also ended up mentioning, the Republican Party over the last few years has been a party that has sometimes waited until election day to participate in elections, and the weather component can sometimes be a variable. If you have the opportunity to vote early, as other folks sometimes end up recommending, that would end up mitigating a last-second snowstorm like we saw yesterday in New York.
So, Mark, we mentioned just how razor-thin this hold that the Republicans have is. What are some of the challenges that they're going to face now with an even smaller majority in the House?
Yeah, here's an important example, even just from yesterday. House Republicans were able to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas by one single vote yesterday. But now with Democrats flipping this seat, that brings down the Republican majority by one vote, which makes things that we saw like yesterday, which was tough, even harder for the Republican Party. This is the thinnest majority that we have seen in recent memory for any Republican, for any party in the House of Representatives, and that majority is now going to be smaller for the Republicans.
All right, Mark, thank you so much.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, a warning from the CDC about teenage drug use, the new report, and what doctors want parents to know.
Up first, though, after the break, a growing crisis in Chicago, why thousands of migrants are on the verge of losing their temporary homes. We'll be right back.
We're back with a look at the growing migrant crisis in Chicago. More than 13,000 migrants are scrambling to find homes and work before the city's rolling eviction deadline.
Chicago's mayor is implementing a 60-day limit on stays in order to make room for the growing number of newcomers. But for many, it could lead to life on the streets. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett has more.
Thousands of migrants spending what could be their final weeks in shelters across Chicago as the city's eviction deadline looms. Like Lisbeth Velasquez, a Venezuelan migrant who says she fled due to political persecution 6 months ago and is now nearing the end of her 60-day limit in the city's shelters.
Dice que tengo fecha de salida para el 1 de abril. ¿Qué va a pasar si yo de aquí al 1 de abril yo no consigo una vivienda? Estoy trabajando, no tengo recursos económicos para pagar una vivienda.
Velasquez says she's navigating the asylum process, but that she won't be able to obtain a work permit until well after her eviction date, a crucial step in finding a place to live.
Te piden el contrato de trabajo, te piden el estado de cuenta, te piden unos requisitos que, actualmente yo no cuento con ninguno.
The limit put in place to provide temporary housing while migrants find work in homes before making room for newcomers.
Only one property manager that has maybe one or two landlords that wants to deal with this. You know, they want them to have work permits, a job, and proof of income.
Would you say the trouble getting work permits has been the largest hurdle for people looking for more permanent housing?
Without work permits and jobs, it's really impossible for people to find places to stay. In our group, we have like doctors, lawyers, teachers. They are really talented people, but they have no way to be certified here.
Advocates like Pastor Phelps are helping where they can, organizing English classes and clothing drives, but say it's unlikely everyone will be able to successfully transition out of shelters, instead needing to reapply for access to another shelter. More than 13,000 migrants are currently living in 27 shelters run by the city and the state, according to a census of new arrivals. Most of them have arrived since June 2023, part of the busing campaign by Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who says he sent more than 100,000 migrants to sanctuary cities. It's costing Texas taxpayers $124 million, according to a public information request by our affiliate KXAN to the state's Division of Emergency Management tasked with the initiative. Chicago's mayor has extended the limit on shelter stays, delaying enforcement due to cold weather, sending notices like this to migrants in shelters, warning the earliest notices to leave will come in mid-March. The disruption in housing will cause further disruption with migrants' legal journey applying for asylum.
What's at stake if these migrants end up homeless again?
First of all, just sending people back into crisis. If someone doesn't have an address where they can receive their court notices, they risk failing to comply with the requirements placed upon them by the government.
Another element adding to their stress.
Es preocupante porque eso van a inundar los distritos policiales, las calles. Creo que no es la solución.
And our thanks to Maura Barrett for that report.
Now let's get to international headlines. Pakistan's two major political parties have agreed to come together following last week's controversial election.
NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavaga joins us from Rome with that and other world news. Claudio, good morning.
Joe Savannah, good morning. Well, that's right. 1 week after the inconclusive parliamentary elections in Pakistan, the two main political parties in that country decided to come together and announce they will form a coalition government. Now, the most votes were won by independent candidates affiliated with the former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who's been in jail since last August. But his party and the other party didn't win enough seats to have a majority in parliament and form a government on their own. So on Tuesday, the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, led by the former Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, and the Pakistan People's Party said they will govern together and propose Sharif as Prime Minister. Let's now go to the state of Victoria in Australia, where at least one man was killed and more than 500,000 homes were left without power after a major storm. Videos posted on social media showed torrential rain flooded streets and trees uprooted by gale-force winds. The state's energy minister, Lily D'Ambrosio, warned the power blackout is the largest in Victoria's history and could last for weeks. And let's end this tour of the world in England, where on Tuesday, tens of women took part in a pancake race that has been going on for centuries. The contestants, dressed in matching checkered aprons and headscarves, sprinted through the streets of Olney, a small town 60 miles from London, while trying not to drop their pancakes. And the race was founded in 1445 after, according to a local legend, a housewife raced off with her skillet after she heard the church bells that announced the Shrove Tuesday service. Now, this is not the first time I see that, guys. My mother, too, used to love to run with a pan in her hand, but mainly because she wanted to hit me. But I was running faster.
Oh, okay.
Well, hopefully it wasn't too hard.
No kidding. We're glad you're okay, Claudia. Thank you so much.
Coming up, past the salt substitute, researchers looking into new ways to cut down on sodium intake. We'll tell you what they found out.
And skyscraper stunts causing safety concerns in Southern California. We're going to take you to L.A., where an abandoned building is attracting a lot of unwanted attention. This is Morning News Now.
Welcome back. The Pentagon announced that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was released from the hospital yesterday after being admitted on Sunday. The Defense Department said in a release, Austin is well and has resumed his full functions and duties. They also said that he would recuperate and work remotely from home before returning to work at the Pentagon later this week. Austin was admitted to Walter Reed National Military Hospital due to a bladder issue related to his December prostate cancer surgery. Doctors say Austin's bladder issues were not related to his cancer diagnosis, though, and won't affect his prognosis.
Time now for your weekly checkup. Most Americans eat way more salt than they should, but a new study finds a substitute could help you cut back.
Plus, new research suggests that certain smells may actually help people who are going through depression.
More on all this. We're joined by NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. Good to have you with us. So we actually want to start with a new CDC report that actually gets into the reasons why teens use drugs.
Yes.
What did it find, and what can parents maybe do to try and curb this?
So this is really important and also slightly disturbing. And I think it's important to know, too, that about 75% of teens who use substances, cannabis, et cetera, have an underlying mental health disorder. So this was a survey, and they actually found that these were the top reasons that kids are using substances, and the one most commonly used is cannabis. 73% used to feel more mellow, to feel calmer, to feel more relaxed. 50%, okay, to have fun, to experiment. But look at this, 44% to sleep better, to stop worrying, to forget about stress. 40% only to help with depression and anxiety. They admittedly said this. As a parent, I cannot tell you how much this would distress me, right? My doctor's orders are this. With your teens, make sure that they're involved in activities, especially sports, right? We know that being on a team and everything like that, they need to have another outlet. They need to have friends, and note changes in behavior. And one, probably the most important pearl here, is that the risk of overdose increases dramatically when kids are using substances alone. alone. So if your teen is going up to their room, spending more time alone, that should be a warning sign. Even if they're using things, if you're with other company, you're less likely to die from a fatal overdose. So I really want to get that message out to parents.
So important. Let's talk about sodium, the salt, when we teased here. So everybody's supposed to be, what's the recommended amount? A teaspoon a day, but a lot of people are getting way more than that.
Use definitely more than that, yeah.
There's a substitute.
There is. So table salt is made up of something called sodium chloride. And the sodium in table salt is the thing that raises your risk for high blood pressure, which then down the road increases risk for heart disease and everything like that. So salt substitutes, you're substituting in something called potassium chloride, which supposedly tastes exactly the same as sodium, but doesn't carry the risks of increasing blood pressure. This was interesting because we know that using a salt substitute like potassium can lower lower blood pressure in people with established high blood pressure. This study actually looked at using a salt substitute to prevent high blood pressure, and in fact it did in the study population in China that this research was done in. So my doctor's orders are this: find a substitute that you like, avoid packaged foods. But here's what I just want to say. So you can actually buy potassium chloride and sprinkle it on your food just like you would table salt. But you have to be careful because too much of anything is not a good thing, including potassium. Certain medications can increase potassium. Certain people with kidney disease already have high potassium. So my doctor's orders here too as a big thing. Before you do this, speak to your doctor and make sure that it's right for you to do it. But I think it's great. The FDA actually released a rule last year to make packaging a little bit more streamlined so that manufacturers can start using potassium and not sodium in their packaged foods, because that's a big culprit.
Yeah, could make a big difference for a lot of folks. All right, finally, we want to talk about a study at the University of Pittsburgh that says smelling something pleasant could actually help with depression.
Yes. So the idea behind this is that people who are depressed have difficulty recalling autobiographical memories. You're depressed, you can't reach back into your memory to feel good about things. But we know that having good memory recall can help with emotional regulation and problem solving. So what this study looked at is that they wanted to see whether word cues or scents could trigger memories. And they found that scents could, more so than words could. So things like coffee or oranges evoked positive memories. My doctor's orders here are: surround yourself with scents that bring you joy. Maybe a certain candle or a certain, perfume reminds you of a good time in your life, and avoid scents that may trigger negative feelings, maybe cigarette smoke, maybe alcohol or things like that, to the best of your ability. I like it because the idea here is that you're breaking a cycle of negative thought. It's not that it's treating the depression, but it's redirecting your thought away from something negative towards something positive.
That's something to be conscious of now, too.
I know.
I have such that association.
Especially if it's not a medicine, it's something that people can try to practice on their own. It's more holistic. I like it.
Smell something you like. Dr. Azar, thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate
as
it.
always. Well, in Los Angeles, an abandoned skyscraper covered in graffiti is not only drawing vandals, but thrill seekers from around the world. Police are now guarding the complex around the clock after this video emerged showing people parachuting off the tower. City officials are warning that these stunts could turn deadly, and they are calling on the developer to do something. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has more.
Jaw-dropping video shared on YouTube appears to show 4 people base jumping from these unfinished towers in downtown Los Angeles.
What?
The same buildings drawing global attention after they were tagged with nearly 30 floors worth of graffiti, an urgent warning from city officials.
We do not want to see a tragedy take place, and I guarantee you a tragedy will take place there if that place is not boarded up quickly.
On Friday, the LA City Council issued a deadline for the owner to secure and clean up the site, or else the city will, and send them the bill.
The owner of the building should be held accountable, and he should reimburse the city for every dime that is spent.
The chief of police says his officers now surround the property around the clock, stretching already thin resources to their limits. At least 18 people have been arrested in connection to the vandalism and trespassing case, but police say only 4 are locals.
Unfortunately, it has become an iconic location to draw people for nefarious acts.
Last month, NBC Los Angeles filmed 2 people with backpacks climbing through a hole in the fence. Their news helicopter later catching vandals making their mark on the skyscraper.
It's nothing like this has happened in graffiti for quite some time.
Pennsylvania graffiti artist John Grimm calling it a moment for the history books.
it definitely is a crime. That's part of the reason why many people do graffiti in the first place, is for that thrill, that excitement. And there's only the excitement if it's a crime.
Construction on the infamous Oceanwide Plaza was halted in 2019 when the Chinese developers say they ran out of money. NBC News reached out to the property owner, Oceanwide Holdings Incorporated, for comment. We have not heard back. A prime piece of real estate in the heart of downtown, once hoped to lure luxury tenants, now a haven for thrill seekers.
There is a real and present danger to people inside that facility of falling to their death or otherwise suffering some type of serious injury or death.
Wow, really something to think about.
No kidding.
Oh my goodness. Thanks to Danny Griffin for that story.
Coming up, stock market scare. New inflation numbers triggering the Dow's biggest one-day drop in nearly a year.
Up next, more on the concern and what it means for your money. One of our favorite financial guests, Caleb Silver, is here with us on Morning News Now. Hi, Caleb. See you in a sec. We're back now with some financial news for you. Investors are hoping for a rebound in markets today after yesterday's rough session.
All three major U.S. indices closed lower on Tuesday following that higher-than-expected January inflation number. The Dow Jones had its biggest one-day percentage drop in nearly 11 months.
Investopedia's editor-in-chief, friend of the show, Caleb Silver, is with us now to talk about this. Caleb, good to have you with us. So walk us through why there was a reaction like this. I know as soon as you saw the inflation number, you were anticipating something like this. And then tell us how concerned investors should be.
Yeah, this was a face ripper, as we say, down on Wall Street, where we had a really big sell-off. It was much worse before the end of the last hour of trading, and then stocks rebounded just a little bit. They look like they're going to open higher. Why? The expectations for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates are now pushed all the way out until June. We may thought we were getting one in March, maybe now in May, but now it looks like it's all the way out in June because inflation is still high. The Fed wants it closer to 2%. We're at 3.1%, and I think we're kind of stuck here in this range for a while.
So, did you say face ripper?
A face ripper, that's what we call it.
All right, that's intense. That's quite the imagery right there. Hardcore. So that's the question I guess a lot of folks have is with interest rates. We initially thought maybe March, and we were thinking maybe May. What is it that they're going to be considering here when they try and figure out what to do with it?
Yes, more inflation reports. This was the consumer price index, right? It rose at a 3.1% annual rate. It's slowing, but that's what we call disinflation, not deflation. Prices are not coming down. So if inflation is still hot, the Fed needs to keep interest rates high to cool the economy. It's worked, but it hasn't worked its way all the way down to 2%. So that's why you saw that stock market reaction. Stocks react to what the Fed does with interest rates. The expectation was that they'd cut sooner. We'd seen this record rally, record highs, day after day in the stock market. Stock market is up some 21% in the past year alone. So a day like yesterday, although it's scary, those happen when you have these intense day after day rallies, and stocks look like they're going to open higher today. And for folks worried about their portfolios, these things happen, especially when you're at record highs. We get sell-offs like this, and then the market resumes and picks up. What happens after higher highs is more higher highs until something really big happens.
Does this put that soft landing we've been hoping for in jeopardy at all, do you think? And what do people at home need to keep in mind right now?
Yeah, they need to keep in mind that interest rates are going to be higher for longer, and that means the APRs on their credit cards are going to remain high. If you have high credit card debt, you got to start paying that off. Prices are going to remain at these levels or in this range right now, and you got to worry about that if you're paying for rent and you're paying for mortgages and stuff like that. So interest rates are going to be high. You got to make sure you adjust your reality, how much it costs to be you, to the fact that this is where prices are and this is where interest rates are and this is where we're going to be probably until June.
Caleb Silver, as always, thank you.
More financial headlines now. A major deal that could soon be sealed between Walmart and smart TV maker Vizio.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and some other money news for us. Hey, Silvana.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yes, so Walmart is reportedly in talks to buy smart TV maker Vizio for more than $2 billion. The move could boost Walmart's advertising business and give it control of more than 20% of the U.S. television market. Walmart is looking for ways to expand the use of shopper data to sell ads on its properties, including Walmart.com and digital displays and connected TVs in its stores. Vizio is already the top-selling TV brand at Walmart, accounting for nearly 70% of all sales. Sony is slashing its sales forecast for the PlayStation 5 this year following weaker-than-expected sales during the holiday shopping season. Sony sold 8.2 million PS5 consoles during the quarter, but profit from its games business fell, hit by higher losses from hardware due to promotions and lower sales of first-party games. Last week, Nintendo hiked its forecast for sales of the Switch. Microsoft is set to share updates on the Xbox tomorrow. And you'll soon be able to tell ChatGPT to remember or forget things you tell it in conversations. OpenAI is testing new memory controls for some free and paid users. They let you tell the chatbot to explicitly remember something. So, for example, you could tell ChatGPT you're allergic to peanuts, and it will automatically store and apply that information to future conversations and tasks. A big drawback in talking with the chatbot has been everything resets once the conversation is over. It doesn't remember who you are or what you previously asked, which is by design for privacy reasons, guys. I don't know. This whole AI thing, just, no.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of the privacy reasons.
Right, I know.
I guess it's good if you don't have
Honestly, I don't believe it forgets everything. I just don't believe that.
I don't buy it either. All right, Savannah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Coming up, secrets from a shipwreck.
When we return, the discovery at the bottom of Lake Superior that's unlocking stories from decades past. Stay with us. You're watching Morning News Now. We're back now with a fresh look at the man in the mirror. We're getting our first glimpse this morning of Jafar Jackson. He's the nephew of the late Michael Jackson, playing the king of pop himself in the upcoming biopic, Michael. And as you can see, the resemblance is pretty uncanny. The 27-year-old is pictured rocking one of his uncle's most iconic looks from the Dangerous tour back in the early 90s. Get this, the photo was taken by the very same photographer who actually captured Michael throughout his career. In a statement, the film's producer, Graham King, says Jafar embodies Michael in a way that no other actor could. The movie is currently in production. It'll moonwalk into theaters in April 2025. No doubt a lot of folks looking forward to that.
Moonwalking, that was good. All right, finally this hour, we end with the discovery of a steamboat that mysteriously sank to the bottom of Lake Superior back in 1940. Well, now researchers hope to unlock the secrets that the boat has held for more than 80 years. NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo has that story and the fascinating new images.
These are new images from the depths of Lake Superior that could hold the clues to a decades-old mystery.
Okay, I'm coming up on something.
The remains of a World War II steamship that 84 years ago set sail one last time. Its helm or steering wheel still intact, its iconic smokestack tipped over, and its name, the SS Arlington, still visible.
When you come down on a wreck that hasn't been seen in 84 years, it's quite a sight.
A 10-year passion project for researcher Dan Fountain, who got help from the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society, together searching the depths of the lake with underwater drones that captured these images.
And then that's when we start to get into the story of the wreck itself. Who was on it? Why did it sink? What was it carrying?
Until now, newspaper clippings were the only insights into what happened back in 1940 when the SS Arlington set sail from Port Arthur, Ontario, carrying wheat. It was expected to arrive 1,000 miles away in Owen Sound, Ontario, but on the way, the boat hit some thick fog. Despite warnings to stay close to shore to avoid heavy winds, the captain, Frederick Burke, ordered the boat to remain in open water. That's when a heavy storm hit, causing the boat to go down on May 1st. All 16 crewmen would abandon the ship and survive, except for Captain Burke.
He decided he's going down with the ship.
Part of the mystery that remains unsolved, why the captain chose to go down with the ship.
His secrets will be there at the bottom of Lake Superior forever.
The ship is set to remain at that same resting place where it's been the last 8 decades. Still, the researchers hope this discovery can help bring closure to what has been an enduring Great Lakes mystery.
What do you think about this being the final chapter for the Arlington?
So there's still people in Midland, Ontario, and that was the ship's home port, that probably have descendants that were on that wreck. 16 people got off of that ship. What did they go on to do in their lives?
Stephen Romo, NBC News.
Wow, just incredible to see some of that.
And a reminder just how big Lake Superior is.
Yeah, so true.
It really is huge.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good Wednesday morning and happy Valentine's Day. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, millions across the Northeast reeling from Mother Nature's winter wallop. That includes New York City, where a 2-year snowy dry spell has finally been broken. We've got more on the cleanup efforts now underway across several states, and we'll look ahead to even more wintry weather headed straight for the already battered region this weekend. Developing news out of Texas, one person is dead, many others injured after a car crashed into a hospital in Austin yesterday. The harrowing witness accounts and what we know about the driver. In Washington, a key Capitol Hill election result that could give us some insight into what to expect in November. The seat of disgraced former Republican Congressman George Santos now flipped blue overnight in a special election in New York. We've got more on Democrat Tom Suozzi's ticket back to Congress as House Republicans vote to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for his response to the crisis at the southern border. And are some major cities breaking up with spring break? Later in the hour, the popular tourist destinations cracking down on those rowdy parties after years of violence and crime. Only love for you this morning as we celebrate this Valentine's Day.
That's right.
Dig a little more into that later this hour. This morning, though, millions of Americans are digging out after that powerful nor'easter slammed the Northeast.
Yeah, the winter wallop creating one of the snowiest days in years for many along the East Coast. Nearly 50 million people from Philadelphia all the way to Boston were under winter weather alerts yesterday morning, with some areas receiving 15 inches of snow. Here in New York, though, more than 3 inches of snow fell in Central Park, and that actually is the most the city has seen since 2022. We've got team coverage this morning. In just a few minutes, we're going to get a look at the full forecast with meteorologist Angie Lassman. But first, we're going to get started with NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda in Randolph, New Jersey. Emily, good morning.
Guys, good morning to you. It's hard to make out, but right now I'm actually walking in the sidewalk of this Randolph neighborhood buried by nearly a foot of snow, much like the rest of this community. Other parts of the Northeast saw even more snow than that, leaving millions today digging out from a brutal blast. After a bitter blast of snow socked the Northeast, this morning millions are cleaning up and shoveling out.
Plowing, shoveling, lovely day.
The wintry mess, the first significant snowfall some have seen in years.
In the last couple of years, we've had virtually no snow.
That all changed Tuesday when parts of Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York all saw over a foot of snow. A white blanket also covering New York City, ending a record 744 days since at least 2 inches of snow hit the ground in the Big Apple. This winter wallop packed a dangerous and disruptive punch, canceling over 1,200 flights nationwide Tuesday. Officials responding to nearly 2,000 accidents across several states. Take a look at this car that slid off the roadway into this embankment, almost down into the ravine below. In Pennsylvania, the nor'easter turning deadly after a 20-year-old man's snowmobile fatally collided with a downed utility line. Heavy snow and strong winds also knocking down trees, crushing cars, and causing major power outages. And it's not the only area where wild weather is causing concern. In Dana Point, California, multi-million-dollar houses precariously perched on the edge of a cliff after landslides swept part of the hillside away. Authorities say the homes aren't in immediate danger. But with much of winter left to go, Americans bracing for more damage across the country.
Today's Ash Wednesday.
And there really is this biting cold right now with wind chills in the teens. Another big concern today is that the lingering snow and slush could turn into ice. And while yesterday's storm brought some of the highest snowfall totals to parts of the region that people have seen in years, you look at Boston, Newark, New York City, they are still more than a foot below the average snowfall for the season, guys.
Emily Ikeda, thank you so much. Now go get warm.
Let's get a look at what's in store for the week ahead with your Morning News Now weather.
Angie Lassman's in studio with us. Hi, Angie. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, guys. That system that Emily was just talking about, that's long gone, but we, of course, are gearing up for a couple more of these systems that are going to work their way across the country here over the next couple of days. In the meantime, we've got 8 million people under winter alerts as this next system is going to emerge out of parts of the Rockies. This is called a Clipper system, and it's going to quickly move across portions of the Midwest through the day today. The plains will see a little bit of snow. Places like Minneapolis could pick pick up a little bit of snow, but those advisories will be in effect from South Dakota to Michigan through the day today. By the time we get into tomorrow, a little bit of rain, a wintry mix across the Great Lakes, and some snow will start to work into portions of the Northeast. This won't be quite as impactful for the large area of the Northeast as this past storm system was, but still we could pick up maybe an inch or two in that region. That system will be out of the picture by the time we get into Friday, but of course there's another system on the way. It works a little farther to the east, moving into portions of the Tennessee Valley. Points south of basically Memphis, we'll see more so that rainy kind of start to the evening hours by Friday. And north of that and all the way up into Cincinnati, we could see the potential for a little bit more snow. So that's what we're watching through the end of the week. When it comes to the snowfall totals, like I said, not all that impressive for the most part. We've got widespread amounts, maybe 1 inch to 2 inches across portions of the Great Lakes. But you can see places like the Dakotas and maybe Minneapolis, in parts of northern Michigan, could pick up a little more than that, 3 to maybe 5 inches in some of these spots, with isolated amounts closer to 6 and even higher. Similar story across the Northeast as we gear up for that next system here, getting into your Thursday and your Friday. Meanwhile, out west, we've got more rain to deal with, and the flooding conditions will likely be an issue here as we go through the next couple of days. This is the system we're tracking through the day today. We likely will see some impressive rainfalls with this, so we know it's not all that hard to see flooding in this region, and that's what we're going to watch as we get into tomorrow too. The system will work a little farther towards the Rockies, and we'll pick up maybe another 1 foot to 2 feet across the Cascades and maybe the Sierra Nevada range. At the coast, it'll be more of a rain event, and that's where we're more concerned for, of course, the flooding. By the time we get into Friday, notice more rain. Next system will start to work in, and that's really going to impact us here as we go through the end of the work week, and then another system by the weekend. So we are going to be busy out west with 1 inch to 2 inches, maybe even up to 3 inches of rain possible, especially along the coast. Now to better news for Chiefs fans, I suppose. We've got a victory parade going on today, and the forecast looks great, guys. It's more like a spring forecast. Wow. Kansas City's got some good karma going. Mid-60s for their temperature this afternoon. Sunny and warm. It's going to be a gorgeous day for folks out there celebrating, especially when you consider they should be around, I don't know, 43 degrees for this time of year. So a lot of shorts and T-shirts out there.
What they made you do, Angie.
Joe, go ahead. What's your Taylor pun?
I'm good. We've got it. We were covered.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I loved it. Well, we're following a shocking incident out of Texas this morning. Overnight, a car slammed into a hospital in Austin, killing the driver and injuring 5 others. Police are still investigating, but they say it appears the act was not intentional. NBC's Morgan Chesky is outside St. David's North Austin Medical Center where it happened. Morgan, good morning.
Yeah, Savannah, crews have been busy all night long trying to repair the massive hole that this car left behind when it went right inside this Austin emergency room. And you can imagine everyone's shock when patients inside the ER suddenly had an entirely different emergency to deal with. One witness telling us that he watched it all play out in real time, and it felt as if he was standing in the middle of a movie. And this morning, we know that multiple patients are still fighting to stay alive. Flames and smoke billowing through the halls of a Texas hospital after a car crashed into the emergency room at St. David's North Austin Medical Center.
We're going to be out checking for patients and injuries right now.
Police say the driver died at the scene and 5 others were injured, including 2 children.
I got a white Acura that drove through the entrance to the civilian side of the emergency room.
In the aftermath of the crash, the Austin PD initially writing on X that this incident does not appear to be an intentional act, but their investigation remains ongoing.
The Austin Police Department has vehicular homicide detectives on the scene, and they are investigating the cause.
Hospital officials say patients who were already inside the ER when the crash happened were sent to other facilities for care, and that no other departments at the facility were impacted.
It felt like I was watching a movie.
Stephen Hughes says he met his wife, Michelle, inside the ER before she was admitted to the hospital for a surgical procedure. Just a short time later, Hughes says he heard loud noises and went out into the lobby. He recorded this video to show his wife what he witnessed.
Down there, I'm thinking that maybe there was an explosion of some kind. I see a car embedded into the ER lobby area. So the tires were spinning, causing tire smoke. And it started to fill up the area pretty quickly.
Hughes tells us the hospital staff sprang into action and began administering first aid.
It was amazing how quickly they responded. I would say they were there within a minute or two after the crash.
And thank goodness they were so close by. We know that right now authorities said there does not appear to be any evidence that would lead them to think this was an intentional act, but they do say the investigation is ongoing. Meanwhile, of those 5 victims injured in this crash, we know 2 of those remain in critical condition, including a young child. Savannah?
All right, Morgan Chesky, thank you very much.
Republicans' advantage in the House of Representatives is 1 seat smaller this morning. NBC News projects Democrat Tom Suozzi has come out on top in the special election to replace expelled Congressman George Santos in New York's 3rd Congressional District. With the seat now flipping to Democrats, the GOP's edge in the House is 219 to 213. The results came just hours after the House voted to impeach a sitting cabinet member, the first time that's happened in more than a century. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was impeached in the Republican-led effort over his handling of the southern border. A lot to cover. Let's get to NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles in Washington with the latest. Ryan, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning, and we'll start with that special election from last night. Immigration, a key issue in this race, and instead of running away from it, the Democrat Tom Suozzi leaned in, accusing Republicans of walking away from a bipartisan border deal. He cruised to victory. On the same night, Republicans were impeaching the Homeland Security Secretary, a move that even some Republicans admit won't have any impact on the border crisis. This morning, a major shakeup in Congress and possible power shift in Washington. Democrat Tom Suozzi flipping a seat vacated by Republican George Santos.
We won!
After the scandal-plagued Santos left following a federal indictment, Republicans were already struggling to pass legislation. Now they can only afford to lose 2 votes.
This race was fought amidst a closely divided electorate.
The closely watched race also potentially a preview of how Democrats could try to win the House and even the presidency. They pursued his opponent, Mazi Pilip, on abortion, sure to be a touchstone issue this year. And Suozzi also focused on immigration, calling for harsher policies at the border as New York deals with an influx of migrants, while also attacking Republicans for their efforts to impeach the Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas.
You want to fix the border? You're not going to fix it by impeaching the secretary.
But hard-right Republicans have stayed focused on that effort.
The yeas are 214 and the nays are 213.
Successfully impeaching Mayorkas last night. House Speaker Mike Johnson embarrassed 1 week ago when the vote fell short, taking a victory lap.
We're happy to get the job done.
The GOP accusing the DHS chief of willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law and a breach of public trust over his handling of the migrant crisis. But some Republicans admit it won't do much to change the situation at the border.
How does that fix the problem at the border?
Who said it was going to fix the problem?
President Biden saying history will not look kindly on House Republicans. The articles will now move to the Senate, who will hold a trial, but conviction and removal from office are unlikely, something even Republicans like Senator Kevin Cramer concede.
Obviously dead on arrival. I mean, it's the worst, dumbest exercise and use of time in a time-constrained environment.
And the Senate will not move on the Mayorkas impeachment until the end of the month. It is expected that they'll dismiss the charges immediately, meaning the secretary is really at no risk of losing his job. Joe?
All right, Ryan, thank you so much.
Now to the race for the White House, with just 10 days to go until the South Carolina Republican primary. Donald Trump's remaining opponent, former South Carolina Governor and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, has spent this month campaigning in her home state. She sat down with Today anchor Craig Melvin to talk about the state of the race. Here's that conversation.
The former president yesterday endorsed a group of loyalists, including his daughter-in-law, to run the RNC now. The idea, reportedly, to bring the campaign closer to the party. What do you make of that?
He's just trying to control as much as he can control. But we don't want a king in America. That's the problem.
They heard your criticism earlier, and they responded. Trump campaign spokesman said, quote, Nikki, brain dead, bird brain Haley reeks of desperation as it's clear she knows she has no shot and is now auditioning for a cable news contract when her 15 minutes are over.
It's a weak response. You know we're under the skin because you saw what he did at the rally on Saturday.
Over the weekend, Donald Trump questioned the whereabouts of Nikki Haley's husband, who's serving a year-long deployment in Africa for the South Carolina Army National Guard.
Where's her husband? Oh, he's away. He's away. What happened to her husband? What happened to her husband? Where is he? He's gone.
You know, to mock my husband, Michael and I can handle that. But you mock one member of the military, you mock all members of the military.
But the reality is he's talked about the military for years now in disparaging ways. Suckers, losers, John McCain, Gold Star families. What's different now? What's different this time?
Before, when he did it, it was during the 2016 election. Everybody thought, oh, did he have a slip? What did that mean? The problem now is he is not the same person he was in 2016. He is unhinged. He is more diminished than he was.
You endorsed him when he ran again. You were a vocal supporter. You were out on the campaign trail.
I'm the first one to say I voted for him twice. I was proud to serve America in his administration. But you can go back and look in my book. I cite multiple times, and he knows it, when I called him out for things that he was doing that were wrong. Since I got out of the administration, I have called him out multiple times, which is why he's upset, because he thinks I'm disloyal. I'm not loyal to anyone. I don't do that. What I do is I call it out. If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. And I'm going to call it out every time.
After the most recent attack on your husband and other military families, you said, quote, he's no longer qualified to be president. How do you square that with raising your hand on that debate stage, saying you would support him even if he were a convicted criminal?
You all signed a pledge to support the eventual Republican nominee. If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
I have said any of those 14 would be better than Joe Biden, because everybody sees how diminished Joe Biden is. I will also tell you, there is no way that the American people are going to vote for a convicted criminal. They're not.
But you said you would.
They're not.
But you said you would.
No, that is not the question. Every Republican nominee signed a pledge before they could even get on the debate stage that said, if we were not the nominee, would we support the nominee? And I said yes, and I stand by that I would support the Republican nominee.
But you said he's no longer qualified to be president.
If you don't know the value of our men and women in uniform, if you don't know the sacrifice that they go through, why should I, as a military spouse and all our military families, trust you to know you're going to keep them out of harm's way? I mean, the reality is he's never been anywhere near a military uniform. He's never had to sleep on the ground. He's never known how to sacrifice. And the most harm he's ever possibly had is getting hit by a golf ball when he's sitting in a golf cart. That's the truth.
He is clearly head and shoulders above the rest in terms of front-runner status right now, you would concede. What does that say about the party? Why has your message not broken through so far?
Well, I think my message has broken through. Not only are we getting Republicans, we're getting independents, we're getting Reagan Democrats, the people who want the anger to stop, the people who want the division to stop, and the people who want us to stop having 80-year-old candidates.
Is there one state where you could say right now, we can win there?
You need 1,215 delegates coming out of New Hampshire. He had 32, I had 17. We've got multiple states. After South Carolina, within 10 days, we're going to hit 20 states. Let it happen. As long as we keep it competitive.
Some have suggested you might be hurting the potential GOP nominee the longer you stay in.
I mean, how ridiculous is it that you're literally saying that I'm hurting him by staying in?
Diverting resources.
No, resources. From a man who spent $50 million of his own campaign contributions on his personal court cases, where the RNC is broke. I'm the one hurting in resources? I don't think so. I'm the one that saves the Republican Party. Look at every general election poll. Look at any of them. Trump loses by 5, by 7. On a good day, he's even. Margin of error. I defeat Biden by up to 17 points.
But President Biden's not in the primary.
No, and we're going to continue to work on the primary. Don't discount that I defeated a dozen fellas. Don't discount that I ended up with 20% in Iowa when y'all said I wouldn't make it. Don't discount that I got 43% in New Hampshire. And don't discount me now.
Hypothetically, if your former boss is the nominee again, would you serve in another Trump administration?
I don't want anything. I don't want vice president. I don't want anything. I am running because, yes, while I thought he was the right president at the right time then, I do not think he's the right president at the right time now. I know what the American people want. They want to be heard. They've been through a lot. They don't see enough money in their wallets. I'm doing this because we have to do something. We can't just sit back and let it happen.
Our thanks to Craig Melvin for that interview. Well, Haley is planning to stay in the race, as she's been saying, at least for now. She tells Craig she will not take on the role of vice president, as you just heard there, or any other position under Trump if he were to win a second term.
Turning now to Egypt, where high-level negotiations to release the remaining hostages in Gaza are still ongoing.
Israel, Hamas, the United States, and Qatar are working towards reaching a ceasefire agreement and putting a potential end to the war. But officials say there are several issues still on the table, leaving the deal out of reach.
NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez joined us once again from Tel Aviv with more on this. Raf, good morning. So walk us through what we saw during those meetings yesterday. Are we any closer to possibly reaching a deal?
Joe, Savannah, good morning. So around the negotiating table in Cairo yesterday, you had CIA Director Bill Burns, his counterparts from the lead intelligence agencies in both Israel and Egypt, as well as the Prime Minister of Qatar, who has been the lead mediator throughout this crisis. They sat down, they talked, second meeting in 2 weeks in this format. It is not clear that there was any major breakthrough in Cairo, but these talks are continuing. I spoke to an Israeli official. He said he was not super optimistic given the scale of the gaps between the two sides. And there is concern about Israel's threatened offensive in the southern Gazan city of Rafah, that could potentially derail negotiations. But despite the Israelis saying they're not optimistic, the fact that they sent a senior spy chief to those talks is a sign that they felt it was worth being at the table. Guys.
So, Raf, tell us, though, some of the major obstacles keeping this deal from going through. And is there any optimism that this will end in an agreement?
So, Savannah, a couple of major hurdles. The biggest disagreement is whether this deal leads to a temporary ceasefire in which some hostages are released, humanitarian aid goes into Gaza, and then the fighting resumes, which is what Israel says must happen because Israel is determined to defeat Hamas completely in Gaza, in their words, or whether this ceasefire leads to a permanent end to the war, which is what Hamas is saying needs to happen. And part of what is so difficult about these negotiations at this stage is that is kind of a zero-sum proposition. Either the war continues or it doesn't, and it is not clear right now how to bridge the gaps. Another issue is how many Palestinian prisoners Israel needs to release from its own jails in exchange for those hostages. During the last ceasefire deal back in November, you saw 3 Palestinian prisoners released for every Israeli hostage. Hamas is asking for much more than that this time, and it is not clear that the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which includes cabinet ministers from the far right, is going to agree to that. Guys.
So, Raf, I know this is a slow process, but what happens next?
So the talks, we believe, are going to continue in Cairo. What's important about this format is Hamas is not at the table themselves. So whatever is agreed in Cairo then needs to be presented to Hamas. And that is kind of a difficult game of telephone in and of itself, because you can hand these proposals to Hamas's political leaders who are spread throughout the Middle East. But ultimately, it is going to be Hamas's military leaders who are in those tunnels underneath Gaza, who are the ones holding the hostages, and they will have to sign on. It is not clear what kind of communication there is with these military leaders right now, given that they are literally underground. So at this point, no one is expecting a breakthrough imminently, but the fact that the talks are continuing is seen as at least a sign of some optimism. Guys.
Raph, very quickly before we let you go, we understand Israel has carried out airstrikes in Lebanon this morning. What do we know?
Yeah, that's right. Israeli authorities are saying that an Israeli woman was killed in the north of the country earlier by rocket fire from Lebanon. Not clear if that woman is a soldier or a civilian, but Israel is now carrying out extensive airstrikes in southern Lebanon in response. There are reports of civilian casualties on the Lebanese side of the border, and this highlights the danger that while all eyes are in Gaza, there is real risk of escalation between Israel and Hezbollah militants in southern Lebanon. Guys.
All right, Raph Sanchez. Raph, thank you.
We've got much more to come this hour of Morning News Now. Will she or won't she? How Kansas City is prepping for a possible Taylor Swift sighting at the Chiefs Super Bowl celebration later today.
But first, spring break season may still be a few weeks away, but some hotspots are already warning potential visitors, be on your best behavior or else. Got more on that next.
Welcome back. In just a few weeks, many college students will be hitting the road, headed to warm weather destinations to celebrate the annual rite of spring break. But in recent years, some of the more popular hotspots have been plagued with crime and violence. Now, some cities are pushing back and cracking down on spring breakers. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us now from the heart of Miami Beach, Florida, where city officials are taking steps to clamp down on bad behavior. This is always quite the hotspot at spring break time. Hi, Sam. Good morning.
Savannah, good morning. Look, Miami Beach has been the center of this sort of scrutiny nationally, internationally for the last several years because of the crime and chaos that's ensued. And the Miami Beach leaders here have a very blunt message. This is not going to happen again. We're not going to see 500-plus arrests, 100 weapons impounded, Savannah, and portions of Ocean Drive behind me, stampedes going on there. That's going to have to stop. What we're looking at right now is a commission that a few weeks ago preemptively passed new measures to crack down. They're doing this specifically targeting a couple of weeks in March, the second and third weekend where you typically see the rowdiest behavior, as there's a growing number of cities right now across the country that are breaking up with spring break.
For generations, it's been a favorite American tradition, from beach blanket bingo in the 60s to MTV's Beach House during the 90s.
Plug into MTV's Summer.
To modern-day spring break parties with sun, sand, and surf, an annual rite of passage embraced as the ultimate party for college students. But in recent years, those warm weather vacations have turned into chaos and crime in cities like Miami Beach.
The problems that we see literally just a handful of weekends.
The bad behavior prompting major security changes from Miami Beach's government ahead of the March crush, including 6 p.m. beach closures and traffic restrictions, among other things.
DUI checks, license plate readers. We are going to be doing bag checks on the beach, restricted access. We're increasing the fees for non-residents to park in our garages up to $100.
There's also the potential for curfews after last year's spring break prompted a state of emergency with more than 570 arrests and multiple fatal shootings.
After 16 stampedes last year, I closed Mango's.
For some business owners, like Mango's nightclub owner David Wallach, the roughly $50,000 to $70,000 he might lose every day is a fair trade-off if it means less violence.
You have to go into a defensive posture.
As some locals hold out hope for some tranquility.
The divorce to spring break has been attempted for every single year for the past 20 years, and it hasn't worked out. So anything that they can do to try to make a difference would be great.
And Miami Beach is not the only city cracking down. Fort Lauderdale pulled the plug years ago on all spring break activities. Myrtle Beach in South Carolina has enacted a noise and foul language ordinance this year, limiting beach hours and banning thongs and G-strings too. But even with all the restrictions, spring break crowds are expected to be up from 2023.
In fact, with lower prices, we're seeing higher bookings initially going into the spring break season.
Now it remains to be seen if cities can stop the spring break mayhem.
And here in Miami Beach, the concept of a curfew has always been a little bit controversial, guys. That does get triggered, but only if the city declares a state of emergency. The commission meeting again now on Thursday in 24 hours to finalize these new rules. Savannah, back to you.
All right, Sam Brock, we know you'll stay on it for us. Thank you.
International headlines now. Tensions are rising after Russia placed Estonia's prime minister on its wanted list.
NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins us from Rome with that and more. Claudio, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. That's right. On Tuesday, Russia launched unprecedented criminal proceedings against the Prime Minister of Estonia, Kaja Kallas. Now, according to TASS, Russia's state-run news agency, the Kremlin accuses her of destroying or damaging Soviet monuments in memory of Soviet soldiers. Nearly 2 years ago, Kallas announced she would remove all of the country's Soviet monuments from public places shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine. On social media, Kallas said the move was unsurprising and proved that she was doing the right thing by supporting Ukraine. Let's go now to Indonesia, where citizens voted for the new president today. The front-runner in the pre-election polls is the current defense minister, Prabowo Subianto, a controversial figure, as he is the only candidate with ties to Suharto, the ruler who was practically a dictator in Indonesia for about 32 years and ruled with an authoritarian and brutal regime. Early results are expected within a day, while official results will come only in a month's time. The winner will replace the hugely popular Joko Widodo, who is serving the final of his 2 terms in office. And let's end this tour of the world in Japan, where the country's oldest bakery, Himuraya, and Japanese electronics company NEC Corp, or NEC Corp, said they used artificial intelligence to produce what they called AI romance bread. They claim the bread captures the essence of the feelings many of us associate with love. The 5 flavors are meant to taste like the 5 key feelings of romance: first encounter, first date, jealousy, heartbreak, and mutual love. Well, it looks like that lovers, at least in Japan, found bread for their teeth. Happy Valentine's Day, guys.
I wonder what jealousy tastes like.
Yeah, intense.
In bread form.
Yeah.
Right.
Claudio,
Sour,
happy Valentine's Day too. That's a good one. Thank you.
Coming up, kicking cars to the curb.
After the break, we'll take you to a newly built neighborhood in Arizona that's putting accessibility over automobiles. That is next on Morning News Now. We're back now with a look at a new idea in real estate that gets rid of the need for your own personal set of wheels.
Introducing Cul-de-sac, the nation's first carless neighborhood built entirely from scratch. The $170 million development project is designed to give people everything they need to live a happy, healthy, and social life, all within walking distance. Can you really have a whole car-free community?
Well, we've got CNBC senior real estate correspondent Diana Olick. She is there. She is at Cul-de-sac in Tempe, Arizona. She's going to tell us how it's possible and what it's like. Diana, good morning. So, I mean, restaurants, retail stores, we understand it's all right there. What do you think? I mean, you're there on the ground. What have you learned about what you're able to get to when you have no cars? What's the vibe?
Well, Savannah, it's really very cool. Look, this rental community has all the amenities. There's a fitness center right there. There's a dog park way behind me. There are outdoor kitchens everywhere. But what it does not have, as you said, is cars. Cul-de-sac is the first community in the U.S. specifically designed for car-free living. And I spoke to the co-founder and CEO, Ryan Johnson. He says it is what Americans want.
We build cities for people, not cars. In the U.S., we've been building the wrong kind of housing for 100 years. We've built sprawl, and it's created car dependency, and it's made us lonelier, less healthy, and less happy. And what people want is to live in walkable neighborhoods, and that's what we're building at Cul-de-sac by focusing on mobility, community, and open space.
So retail, restaurants, close to 200 apartments, all within steps of each other. No cars means no parking spaces, no garages, and that opens up more landscape for social areas. The complex is strategically located right next to the area light rail system. All residents get a free pass, and the first 200 also get a free electric e-bike, and a partnership with Lyft gets them all discount rides. So no problem, right?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, all that you can see a lower environmental impact, lower emissions, overall just healthier for residents. Is that enough to make people actually ditch their cars?
Well, you know, I spoke with a lot of the residents here yesterday. One of them, Juan Ramos, told me that he grew up in Arizona, but he left here because he didn't like the car-dependent sprawl. At 27, though, he just moved back. And he says that car-free living has actually really opened his eyes.
Frankly, for most of the apartments I've lived in for years, I've never even talked to my neighbors.
So, I mean, I know people, like, that's Pete over there, that's Ben over there, and I'm like, that's the first time I've said that.
And it's really interesting also, I know it's dark, you can't see, but there are actually retail stores, they call them pods here, and some of the people who live here are the owners of the small businesses in the retail, so you really have it all in one spot, guys.
Very interesting. Dana, so I guess a couple of questions just if people are like, would this work for me? One is, are most of the people that you're meeting there then working either within walking distance or where that light rail gets them right near work? I mean, is that kind of something that people are thinking about? And what about when it's super hot out and not having a car to get places?
You know, that was my question to them, too, about the heat, because, and a lot of people will work from home. Look, we're in this new work from home environment. So some people work from home, some people work in the area, and the light rail is right here. But you have to wonder if it's going to be over 100 degrees for most of the summer. They've actually built the buildings very close together, which keeps the areas cooler because they're all in the shade. But again, that'll be the true test this summer.
There you go. Diana Olick, very interesting. Thank you so much. We've still got much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including some salty shoppers sounding off on social media over shrinkflation, higher prices for smaller servings. So what's behind it all? Well, it's about businesses' bottom line.
Plus, if you're looking for love on this Valentine's Day, stick around, because after the break, we've got some top tips on how you can find that special someone in 2024. That's next. We're back now with a closer look at our economy, and we're taking a closer look because things we are buying seem to be, well, getting smaller. Americans might be grappling with high prices at grocery stores, but many are also finding their servings have shrunk.
Yeah, this is called shrinkflation, when instead of increasing prices on products, companies kind of keep that the same, but then reduce the amount that you actually get. So what can you do about it, and how can you make the most of your money? NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans joins us with help on this. Hey, Christine, good morning.
Good morning. You maybe have noticed this when you go to the grocery store, but fewer chips in the bag, maybe a smaller number of cookies in the sleeve, maybe a smaller, skimpier, roll of toilet paper. This is called shrinkflation, and it's really a byproduct of how much inflation we've had the past couple of years. Watch.
In aisles all across America, the choices are bigger than ever, but the size, not so much. From cereal to chips to detergent, so-called shrinkflation may be squeezing down your favorite snack or takeout order and your wallet.
That's the small queso. That was $6.
Same price, smaller amount, and some frustrated consumers are venting about it on social media.
Look at this.
I'm always getting less, but I either pay more or the same amount that that it already cost, but I don't get as much.
This is barely even a half of a cup of noodles.
I'm fed up. No pun intended.
Even President Biden on Super Bowl Sunday calling shrinkflation a ripoff.
The American public is tired of being played for suckers.
New inflation numbers were higher than expected in January. Food prices rising 2.6% versus last year. Grocery prices specifically rising a little over 1%. But they're up 25% since 2020. A December report from Senator Bob Casey's office found shrinkflation most common in paper products and snacks. But the Consumer Brands Association, which represents food and beverage companies, says company costs are also high and consumers have a choice.
We're dealing with a much higher cost structure and trying to find a way to equitably and responsibly produce products that meet the consumer where they are.
So it's too simplistic to say that companies are getting record profits by passing all of the costs onto consumers.
Absolutely.
Consumer advocate Edgar Dworsky says shrinkflation grows during periods of price pressure.
Almost every product has been downsized in one way or another. I'm waiting for the day when you open that carton of eggs and you only see 11 inside. We're just kind of coming off high inflation, so maybe we'll see fewer products shrinking, but it's never going to go down to zero.
And for American consumers, that's a big bite to swallow.
So, Christine, in there you mentioned 25%. That's the prices are up since 2020. We also just got this not-so-great inflation news this week. I mean, tell us, when can we expect to see this change?
Yeah, those grocery bills up 25%. I looked at that 4 or 5 times at that chart trying to see. This is why people feel so lousy about the economy. So, look, USDA says that
grocery prices will probably drift a little bit lower, maybe 0.5% lower this year, so they won't get worse, probably. We're seeing some categories start to stabilize here. Again, stabilize after 4 years of inflation. So if you notice that your favorite snack foods are in a smaller bag, there's some things you can do. You can look for a competitor, because not all companies change the packaging at the same time. Look at the unit price or the net weight of something. Don't just look at the cost of it, because that might be a little bit misleading. So you have to do a little bit of research, math. Sorry, everybody.
I was going to say math.
Math in the grocery lane, and you can see. But you know, some categories of foods, frankly, people complained, and the companies give coupons if you have that kind of extra time on your hands. You can just send an email to the company and register your disgust, or buy something else.
All right. Very good.
All right, good tips there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's get to some other financial headlines. This morning, move over Amazon. Chipmaker NVIDIA is now worth more than Bezos' behemoth.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Savannah. Yes, so NVIDIA is now worth more than Amazon. The chipmaker, which has capitalized on the excitement over AI, now has a market value of $1.78 trillion, and that's based on yesterday's close. Amazon is worth $1.75 trillion. It is the first time NVIDIA has surpassed Amazon since 2002. The stock is up nearly 250% in the past year on strong demand for its AI server chips, which can cost more than $20,000 each. Shares of Lyft surging following the company's earnings last night, but they pulled back sharply when the CFO of the ride-sharing service admitted there was a big typo in that report, which changes how much it expects to grow this year. Lyft is seeing more riders and bookings, but it's struggled to compete with larger rival Uber. Lyft stock is down more than 80% since its IPO in 2019. And Mickey Mouse and Cinderella may soon be joining a union. Workers who bring those characters to life at Disneyland are looking to organize. Labor groups say performers want better safety conditions and scheduling policies. Most of the more than 35,000 workers at Disneyland already have labor unions, but the roughly 1,700 performers in parades, character actors, and support staff do not, guys.
All right, Silvana, thank you so much.
You got it.
It is, of course, Valentine's Day. Love is in the air for many folks. You might be in a relationship, a situationship. You might be actively dating or still looking for love. But whatever your status, one thing's for sure, the dating scene can be full of unexpected twists and turns.
Yeah, we're going to try to take the guesswork out for you with a look at what's trending in the world of dating and relationships this year.
No one better to help us do it than one of our favorite guests, Damona Hoffman, the author of F the Fairy Tale and host of the Dates and Mates podcast. Damona, good to see you. All right, so let's start out looking at how couples are connecting. Dating apps are popular. Which apps are sort of trending right now? How can people find their perfect match?
Dating apps are as popular as ever. And when we look at Google search results, Tinder is still on the top. But interestingly, the second most popular search for dating apps is actually for Ashley Madison. That's the married dating site. So look, you can find whatever you want online. And that's why I tell people in my book to make sure that you're on an app that aligns with your goals, your values, and that you enjoy the functionality, because then you won't be burnt out and frustrated using it.
Don't love what's super popular. That's very interesting, Damona. Okay, so another question for you. For people kind of maybe like how to handle dates, we're in an election year. Is talking about politics on the table, off the table? How do people feel about that right now in the world of dating?
Yeah, a few years ago, I used to say, don't talk about politics on a date at all. Now it's become one of the most important things. And Gen Z singles are saying they actually like having political debates on dates. So that's a big shift, and especially in an election year. We saw in 2020 that people were really prioritizing having dates with other engaged voters, and just being a voter was something that puts you to the top of the algorithm. However, now we're seeing that people are really looking for political alignment. And of course, we seem to look at politics as a proxy for a whole other set of belief systems. So we are not really going to be doing that second layer of investigation on our dates, but we are going to want to know, how are they voting?
And that makes sense this year, because that's so much of what people talk about, and does sort of, it's on people's minds. All right, I know we're seeing couples sort of break this mold of traditional relationships, sort of this idea of meet, move in, and marry, or maybe meet, marry, then move in. But that's sort of changing. What are some of the trends we're starting to see?
So a few years ago, I started to see a trend for what we call lat dating, living apart together. And this actually, among Gen Z singles and younger singles, there's now more of a drive for this. I used to only see it among 55 plus singles who had their finances set, had their property, and weren't really looking for someone to build a life with. They already had a life that they were inviting someone into. So they were staying apart, and maybe even long distance. And especially coming out of the pandemic, where people really relied on online tools, not just dating apps, but it was going down in the DMs on social media. It was also online communities sprung up as another way for people to meet. So we're seeing a lot of long distance love. We're seeing a lot of lat relationships, and we're seeing even international relationships forming and staying together.
Wow. Good that they're working. That's the key thing there. All right.
Absolutely.
Damona Hoffman, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining us early this morning.
Happy Valentine's Day.
By the way, in case y'all forgot, Joe's college roommate.
Yes, also Damona is my college roommate.
That's my favorite resume point.
Yeah, exactly. I know, but you didn't get that in the intro.
If that doesn't sell books for you, I don't know what will. All right. Thank you, Damona.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up, the stage is now set for one epic Super Bowl victory party in Kansas City today.
But the burning red question is, will Taylor Swift be there? Our intrepid Swiftie team's on the ground looking for answers, but does the math add up? Ahead of her long-haul flight to Melbourne for her next Eras Tour stop this weekend. We'll bring you what we know up next.
Kansas City is preparing for its biggest party of the year, which is actually becoming something of a routine for football fans there. Today, the Chiefs will celebrate their latest Super Bowl victory with a parade through the city after winning their third championship in just 5 seasons.
Yeah, well, we know MVP Patrick Mahomes will be there, but there's another star whose potential appearance is leaving many fans waiting in eager anticipation. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch is on the ground to give us the lowdown. Jesse, what do we know?
Well, we're still working to find out more information, Savannah and Joe. Good morning to you guys. The question on our minds, will Travis and Taylor be together in KC on Valentine's Day? But I can tell you who is already here. Many members of Chiefs Kingdom. Take a look at all the fans who are already out here. We are still hours away from the start of this parade. Our team meeting people who were camping out as early as 11:30 last night, and the parade doesn't start until 11 this morning. All of these people could be part of something that we have not seen in this city and in the football world in almost 20 years.
In Kansas City this morning, the new swag has been purchased and the stage is officially set for a one-of-a-kind party. Roughly 1 million people are expected to cram these streets to celebrate the newly crowned back-to-back Super Bowl champs. And beyond seeing star players like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, some fans are hoping they'll catch a glimpse of Kelce's girlfriend, pop superstar Taylor Swift, who helped make 11-year-old Rylan Stouch a big Chiefs fan, like her mom.
Could we have a parade on Valentine's Day without Suozzi?
No. It's got to make the end of the love story, right?
Yes. There's no official word on if Taylor will be here. We even took the question to City Hall.
Mr. Mayor, will we see Taylor Swift at this parade?
All I can say for us is we'll be ready no matter what happens.
So we don't know for sure if Taylor will be here, but we did find out what she said to Travis during that post-game embrace.
Thank you for making it halfway across the world. You're the best, baby.
Oh, my God.
The absolute best. Was it electric?
It was unbelievable.
And Travis's mom, Donna, feeling the love on her flight home from Las Vegas.
Mama Kelsey's on board, everybody. Congratulations to her and her family.
Southwest Airlines naming Mama Kelsey MVP, Most Valuable Parent.
How about those Chiefs?
That was the scene in KC after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year. This time around, Coach Andy Reid says he told his players not to have too much fun.
That was mentioned a couple times, so it's great to have fun, but, you know, be smart.
But with today's warm forecast and Swiftie intrigue, the city is preparing for even bigger crowds this time around at a parade that could exceed
our wildest dreams.
So we'll see. Lyrics, puns abound here in Kansas City this morning, guys. We are waiting to find out who will be in attendance, but I can tell you they've done this 3 times now in the last 5 years, but this one definitely sticks out, and you know why. It's because this parade is Taylor's version, guys. Back to you.
Wow, can you get me one of those?
We're taking orders.
I'm serious. I'll send you an email.
Thank you, Jen.
Venmo me.
To be clear, we know the team will be there, by the way, so there's that. The team is going to be there. All right.
That's not the point.
That is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.